This is Li Chen from Tsinghua University, a junior in philosophy. It is a pleasure to join this profound conference, and I've learned a lot from it. I hope my brief presentation can provide some useful information for you too. I'd like to introduce a project held by other four undergraduate students and me, which is called a study on the compatibility of local reading and external interpretation of Southeast Asian literature. It is belong to the college students innovation and entrepreneurship training program. We got this idea when reading the literature of third world and concerning criticism. But first, let me clarify what is third world I mentioned here. The term third world usually refers countries that remained non-aligned with either NATO or the Warsaw Pact. But in China, most of the time, we use this term to refer to developing countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. This definition was introduced by Chairman Mao. Since the Cold War has passed, I use the latter definition for convenience in my presentation. Now let's turn to the literature in third world, which is lively and getting more and more attention now. Take Nobel Prize literature as an example, which is a heated topic recently. In the past 30 years, 1/5 of the winners come from third world, not to mention the hybrid ones and cross-cultural writers. Also, there is a book prize, a literary prize awarded each year for the best novel written in English and published in United Kingdom or Ireland. When the prize was created, only novels written by Commonwealth, Irish, and South Africa and later Zimbabwean citizens were eligible to receive the prize, so it mainly awarding third world writers. It appears to be a cheerful thing if we don't consider the interpretation imposed on these writers. All the prizes and organizations recognizing and consecrating these writers are all from the dominant literary spaces, with long history, great publishing house, famous scholars, and adequate capital. Without credit from the dominant space, writers can't be famous and they cannot be spread over the world. But if they accept the credit, they accept the interpretation from these dominant spaces at the same time. For example, now everyone knows Mo Yan as an hallucinatory writer or a magic realism writer, just like Garcia Marquez, Ika Kuniawan, and so on, because Nobel Prize awarded them for this hallucinatory style. But is it right to throw all these third world writers into the ambiguous category of magical realism, neglecting the great difference among them just because you think they are weird and strange? When I read Mo Yan as a Chinese, I saw nothing hallucinatory. On the contrary, I see our history, belief, and society, which should be taken seriously as some kind of fact rather than magic. I want to find out the gap between interpretation and the intention of writers. That's why we, a group of students majoring in history, philosophy, and literature, came out of this project. We take Pramodia, Anatta Toa, and Ika Kuniawan as a starting point. Read and learn their history, religions, folk stories, try to understand rather than to cover, to fit rather than to avoid. To create a new way of reading rather than to apply Western theory mechanically. In the end, we can get a better understanding of ourselves, retrieve our own writing literature, add to a polycentric literature world. Thank you for listening. Do you have any questions?
Let's see if there's any question in the chat room. Right. I only have one question for you, so I'm not particularly oh, there's any question? Is there a question? Right. So maybe I'll ask my question. I'll just shoot it right away. You mentioned about the interpretation of literature. So sometimes I think we might quite understand the interpretation by the author and other the readers or the audience, especially audience from different backgrounds may be different. So what do you think about how should we interpret or understand the literature, given that we have so different cultural backgrounds? Say for someone you mentioned in the first world to understand some literature in the third world, how should they do that?
Well, I think the reader's interpretation or the normal reader's interpretation can be various, but the interpretation which creates problem is the ones who have authority. For example, those prizes, the scholars, and the organizations. And I really welcome the openness to normal readers, and if there is not a interpretation of authority, then the readers will try to find out the real intention of the writer by themselves. For example, they will look into the history, the religions, but rather than just accept the interpretation by the authorities.
Right. So maybe more understanding about the culture and the background of the author, and during that exercise to understand more about the different other countries in the same process.
Yes, I think the literary work is a voice from this country, and if these voices are covered by the interpretations from the authorities, then the spreading and the fame of these works means nothing.
All right. Thank you very much, Chen.